Recently I went on a series of hikes with my brother to take some pictures when I came across this house in the woods. I really thought it looked cool, so I took the other photos I had taken and decided to make an art piece based on them. So I imported them into PureRev and started to block out the scene to get all the ideas I had in my head into Blender as fast as possible. This isn't supposed to look pretty, but it should give me a canvas where I can start experimenting with lighting and composition. Once I was kind of happy with the layout of the scene, I got started with the lighting. And I kind of had the idea in my head that I wanted to make this as accurate as possible, so I kind of tried to look up how high the sun is in the sky at different times, which is kind of overkill and doesn't really make sense, and I also didn't understand any of what I saw, so I just stuck to what looked the best. So yeah, the sky texture alone didn't quite direct the attention to the house as much as I wanted, so I added an area lamp to illuminate the house a bit more. Then I started to make the tree model, but my mistake here was that I just made generic pine tree instead of actually looking up what kind of tree was in my reference. So later I'll redo the tree models, but for now I just replaced the pillars with these bad models I made and moved on to adding a ground texture and working on volumetrics a bit. For that I just used a big cube with a very slight emission shader plugged into the volume output, and that gave me a really nice mist effect. With the lighting and volumetrics done, I moved on to modeling the house. So I opened up the reference image and copied the layout basically one to one. I really tried to model it the way it would make sense, so I added these beams here and then put the roof tiles on top. After that I just textured them and did the same for the beams and house. But I didn't like the way the house bricks looked, because it didn't make logical sense. A real house is made up of individual bricks and you can't really get that same feeling when just using an image texture on a really flat model. So I decided to build the CG house out of bricks too, but I didn't want to do it by hand. So I made a geometry nodes generator that will let me control all the brick properties, including how run down they should be. But now I moved on to the texture of the bricks. This was another challenge, because I made a brick texture before that had these tiny pebbles and the bump, but from afar it didn't look good. So I looked at the video by Polygon to see how they made their brick texture, and I noticed that the bricks kind of have varying colors, as well as that they have this kind of textured part that then suddenly stops. So I just made that and it immediately looked much better. Something that was still missing is a little bit of dirt and grunge buildup. So I added that too, using a couple of stretched out noise textures to give it that look like if water were dripping down the walls and taking dirt with it as well. But then I gave this scene a render and noticed the trees weren't really looking right. So I thought I should identify the kind of tree that grows in my reference images, and I found out it's a white spruce tree. So I searched for images and modeled a new tree based on them. Then I added the particle system with the twigs to the new model as well, but it wasn't quite looking correct. The way I fixed that is by reducing the size of the twigs the further up the tree they got, and also reducing the size of the twigs the closer they got to the edge of the branch. And that didn't yet give me the desired look, because I still had to increase the branch amount by like 4 times. But now they look really good, at least in the distance. Now I wasn't really happy with the camera position, so I experimented some more and landed on this one here, but this camera position isn't final, so later I'll change it up again. For the closer trees you could still see that the twigs are just cut out images, so I decided to make a copy of the tree model with more detail. Then I placed them in the places where the low-res trees weren't quite holding up. Afterwards I moved on to adding some grass. This took quite a bit of experimenting to get looking right, but for now I stuck to this. Now let's get the first version of the scene done. So for that I added a fence that surrounded the entire property, as well as placing a couple of 3D scans I made in the scene. By the way, if you'd like to have the building along with the wall generator and the procedural brick texture, as well as 10 optimized 3D scans out of my Rustic 3D Scans asset pack, along with the finished project file and the files for every future project I make, or you'd just like to support me, then please check out my Patreon. You can get access to all of that for just $5 a month, and the collection of stuff on there will only be growing in the future. Thank you so much for considering. But now back to the video. I then gave the scene a render and posted it to Reddit to get some feedback, only to get beaten by goddamn moldy orange. I mean, it's a pretty cool effect, I have to say. Okay, but I got some really valuable feedback from that, so I made some to-dos based on the feedback and started to work on them. The first thing was to tweak the camera position again. Someone had the idea to use a Dutch angle, and I thought that was a great idea, so I did that. Someone also assumed that I was going for a kind of stylized realism look, and yeah, that was totally what I was going for, hence the folder name. Yes, but the other to-do was that someone said the colors of the bricks kind of made it look like a toy building, so I assumed that they were a bit colorful, so I reduced that a little bit and I think it looks great now. So now, after rendering the scene from a couple of different camera angles and adding a couple of lens effects and color grade to the render, this is the final result. Thank you for watching.